All right, this is Group One's presentation on the Byker versus Maine's lawsuit and decision by the Supreme Court of Michigan on partnership law and implied authority. The details of the case: David Byker and Thomas Maines. They were buddies. They knew each other. One had done some accounting work. They started a bunch of businesses together. It was great. They were so excited. They were making all sorts of money. But then they formed Pier 1000 Limited, which was a bummer because it did not work out too well for them. Byker wouldn't give up. Maines eventually stopped putting money into it, and that led to the lawsuit.
So within the lawsuit, Byker ended up suing Maines for the money, saying that they were in a partnership and that all business affairs were included in that, even though he didn't do it or did everything and took out the loan and all that kind of stuff without Maine's agreement. So, okay.
The question may ask, was there a partnership? But the qualities of partnership we can learn today are joint ownership of a business, sharing of profits or losses, and equal management rights.
So there's a couple different laws that come into play as far as Michigan law and MCL, which is the Michigan Compiled Law, Section 449. That's a lot of the laws in this particular section, whether it's .6 as you see in that first or .1 in the next one. It originally stated that the intent to form a partnership or intent to carry on as co-owners a business for profit. That is a quote from the section. And then they had actually added at a later date, they had amended section 449.1 and added the phrase regardless of whether they subjectively intended to form a partnership. Now, that was never officially adopted, so that gets a little tricky here, but if we're moving on to the next slide, there's actually a couple of federal laws in place here as well. So there's the Uniform Partnership Act that was enacted in 1914 that originally outlined the definitions of partnerships and what those entailed, different kinds of partnerships. And the revised Uniform Partnership Act, so RUPA, in 1994, there were additional revisions in 1997 as well, I believe. This specifically declared the association of two or more persons to carry on as co-owners of business for profit forms partnership. So again, we see that's regardless of whether or not it's specifically written down, if there's a contract, if two people are acting as partners in a business, if they're working together to make money, that's considered a partnership. As far as how that applies to Michigan as well, there's a couple interesting things here where Section 202 of RUPA, which we talked about before, Michigan didn't actually adopt, but because of several other cases, several laws that took place as well, Michigan judges in a lot of cases have ruled very similarly to that section of RUPA under the MCL 449 that we discussed on the Michigan slide specifically. It tends to lie fairly close to RUPA in most cases that have been decided.
Okay, so the decision, the Supreme Court of Michigan, they decided according to the partnership in 1994. When it was sent to the Court of Appeals, they said that the Court of Appeals incorrectly interpreted the statutory and the common law partnership in Michigan. They said that they didn't, the proper focus is on whether or not they intended to carry on a business as co-owners and not whether they subjectively intended to form one. And so what that means is even with the consent, without the consent of Maines, Byker had the authority to enter into the loans that he took out, and Maines was liable to pay his share even though he didn't have knowledge of them because they were acting as a partnership, so he had to pay his half. And so they were legally considered partners, even though it wasn't formally stated or contracted.
Well, let's talk about partnership and Christ. Peter and Andrew were partners with James and John in a prosperous fishing business that they gave, so much so that they gave other men employment and had boats. And they left all that when Christ asked them to follow him. And the ultimate thing was the apostles all went on to become partners with Christ in the work of building the kingdom of God.